even though I homeschool, honestly, in the United States, only 4% of the population of children are homeschooled. That's very small. That's not a large voting block right there. Okay? So all these kids, and even concerned parents who...
A lot of the same information, almost all of it, and it's footnoted. So they can go to those.
Gloria Harmon is a concerned parent who currently homeschools one of her 2 children. She's a full-time mother, which is more than a full-time job. That was editorial comment, it wasn't on the sheet. And a part-time worker at her church. Ms. Harmon has taught 8 years in the public school system, 5 years as a special needs educator, and 3 years of social studies. Her concerns as an educator and homeschool mom have led her to be involved in the Common Core issue, where for so many, that's where it begins when you find out about it. Ms. Harmon was raised in Miami by her immigrant Cuban parents who left during the height of the revolution. This is an important reality to have control. This is an important reality to have control and knowledge of her children's education, and that goes for all of us who are parents or grandparents in this room. And with that, I'd like to introduce you all to Ms. Gloria Harmon.
Good evening, everybody. I think Dr. Effrem is probably going to cover a larger scale of the Common Core standard, but I'm coming here as a mom. I'm coming here as a former teacher and a current homeschooling mom, and I just have a lot of concerns. And the first thing that came to mind when I heard about Common Core standards is, what about local control? Just like anything else, local, can you hear me now? Okay. Local control is key, and that was my first concern. I didn't even think of what quality would result from these common standards. As I started looking into it, my fears were justified. Who is going to decide what our kids are going to learn? Yes, they will tell you, if you research Common Core, you will see that it says Common Core state standards. The goal is that everybody's on the same plane, that we raise the standards, that we compete better with other countries in the world. But the bottom line is, that's not what's going to happen. And I've looked into this curriculum. The quality of the curriculum is questionable. If you just look at, I went in deeper actually. Right now, Common Core standards, if you start researching it, what are the things they talk about? Well, the 2 main emphases are math and English. But if you keep researching, it's going to cover everything. The next thing that's coming is going to be called the Next Generation Science Standards. It's tied in with Common Core. So yes, you think, well, math, harmless. How much harm can it be done? Can they do to math? English, well, the choice of books, what they choose to emphasize. And one of the things with Common Core that they're going to do is they're going to require more nonfiction reading. What nonfiction are they going to emphasize? Okay. With math, I'm already seeing it in math. Common Core is not supposed to be fully implemented till the year 2014-15 school year. I'm already seeing with my son in 3rd grade in the public school system, they don't require him to memorize the multiplication facts. It's all about understanding. So they have to spend a whole year of the why behind multiplication facts. His teachers, the way they were talking to me, I could tell they were frustrated. I'm seeing these teachers in the school system frustrated. I'm speaking to teachers that are talking about retiring. And these are teachers that are great teachers that have been in the system for a long time. And they're just sick of it. So the math is questionable. The English is a big concern. What books are they going to have my son read? And then, as I started looking, I looked at science. Oh my goodness, that's the next step, of course, along with social studies. I just want to read to you, and this is directly from the Next Generation Science Standards, with, by their own words, say they're collaborating with Common Core. They're the next step after Common Core is implemented. And let me just read you from their literature what they say. They say the definition of science in terms of Western science, while ignoring historical contributions from other cultures, presents a limited or distorted view of science. It gets better. Furthermore, such view was disrespectful to other cultures and could be regarded as racism. It gets better. Stay seated. So they also say that by emphasizing engineering, it recognizes the contribution of other cultures historically. This, their words, redefines what counts as science. So we're going to redefine what counts as science. And here's the good part, which in turn defines and determines social science curriculum. So you're going to hear, if you go to administrators, if you go to people in the education field, they're told, no, these are standards, not curriculum. We develop our own curriculum. I'm sorry, but if you really think it through, standards and curriculum go hand in hand. If in the standards it says global warming is caused by human beings, guess what? Your curriculum is going to teach your child that global warming is caused by human beings. So they're closely related. They go hand in hand. You cannot separate it. But legally, they cannot say that it's a national curriculum because that goes against 3 federal statutes. So let me read you a little more about this science that's coming. The Next Generation Science Standards also states that through social activism, students develop critical consciousness of social inequities, especially as such inequities that exist in their communities. They're going to create little social activists, little community organizers. Okay, so now some people might, well, this sounds good. Who is to decide what your child learns? Who is to decide what is the passion for your child? What is he going to focus on? Is it you as the parent, the grandparent, the aunt, the guardian, or is it a government? Now, as you look into this, and I think Dr. Effrem is going to get into more detail, as you look into this, technically, it's not the government saying you have to do this, but it's through government funding. This was kicked in through the stimulus package. All these organizations that have their hand in the development of the standards and in turn are going to have their hand in the development of the assessment, all are receiving money from the federal government through the stimulus bill. And also, somebody mentioned, Linda, the Bill Gates Foundation, they're receiving money from them because they're a big supporter and they're backing it up by millions. And actually, Bill Gates is working with, I think it's the largest publishing company in the world to develop curriculum for the Common Core. So local control is out the door if you're dealing with Common Core standards. And we all know that the future of this country lies in our children. What they learn and what they hear they're going to be the future voters. They're going to be the future voting bloc. They're going to make legislative decisions by who they vote or whether they go into office. It's bad enough that our universities have already been hijacked, and now we're going to start with our kindergartners and up. And, you know, I'm sure Dr. Effrem has a lot more information, but I want to close with 2 quotes. One of them is from Madison. Now, James Madison, when he wrote Federalist 48, he said, "It will not be denied that power of an encroaching nature and it ought to be effectually restrained from passing the limits assigned to him." Sure, I skipped that. In other words, power, just you give a little, they take more. By giving the government or these large organizations the power to choose what the standards are going to be for all the kids, uniform, across the country, we are taking away the power from our hands. And we're giving it to bureaucrats, quite honestly, because how many of them taught in the classroom? I've been in the classroom, I've taught in the projects, I've taught advanced kids, I've taught special ed kids. I've seen all sides as a mom, as a teacher, and as a homeschooling mom, and it's a concern. And if you think as a homeschooler you probably don't have to worry, yes we do. And private schools, not just charter schools, will have to worry because just here in Florida, we have the voucher program. The state decides who gets the vouchers. So it's very easy for them to say, are you accredited? Do you follow Common Core state standards? If you don't, we cannot make you part of the voucher program. And money talks, and these private schools need to survive. So this will affect all of us. And as homeschoolers, I can tell you right now, the homeschooling curriculum I currently use for math is already advertising Common Core. They're already saying they're aligning with Common Core. And from what I see in math, it's a big concern. It's a big concern, and there have been experts who have said, the only mathematician I think on the panel, that it's going to set us back 2 years compared to other countries. So this is big. Education is key. And just my last quote, and this is from Woodrow Wilson. He used to be in education. This is lovely, and this is how he viewed education, and quite honestly, education is key, and this is how he viewed it, and I do believe that how a lot of people who are making these decisions view our education system. It says, it was for that reason that I used to say, when I had to do with the administration of an educational institute, again, this is Woodrow Wilson, that I should like to make the young gentlemen of the rising generation as unlike their fathers as possible. Not because their fathers lacked character or intelligence or knowledge or patriotism, but because their fathers, by reason of their advancing years and their established position in society, had lost touch with the processes of life. They had forgotten what it was like to begin. They had forgotten what it was like to rise. They had forgotten what it was like to be dominated, like a victim, dominated by the circumstances of their life on their way up, from the bottom to the top. Therefore, they were out of sympathy with the creative, formative, and progressive forces of society. We have a big job. This is important, and we need to get off the couch and we need to do something, because I am concerned. Even though I homeschool, honestly, in the United States, only 4% of the population of children are homeschooled. That's very small. That's not a large voting block right there. Okay? So all these kids, and even concerned parents who have kids in the public school system or in a private school, okay, because I know the Catholic school is already accepted Common Core. All Catholic private schools. Okay? That is going to affect us. And mom and dad work very hard, and most of us, you get home at what, 5, 6 o'clock at night, do you really have time to go over everything they did and then try to unbrainwash them? Come on, where's dinner, where's homework, and you need sleep. So, I hope that helped a little.
Technical difficulties, there'll be a timeout.
I could sing or dance, but it wouldn't do it. Never mind. It's a good thing I saw.
Thank you. There goes one of the most prolific writers I've ever met in my life. Ladies and gentlemen, again I tell you, and Ms. Harmon brings that point home so eloquently, about the need for each and every one of us to grab our neighbor, our brother or our sister, a complete stranger, and bring them up to speed on what is going on. This isn't really a new idea, as Ms. Harmon points out. Wilson was talking about implementing this 100 years ago. Now, we may not be able to undo it completely overnight, but I tell you what, we have got to step on the brakes at a minimum. And the only way that gets done, is we support people in local public office, Terry Kemple, Stacy White, of people who share our views and values. We do that when the election comes, but right now, immediately, tonight when you go home, you get on the computer, if you have one, you get on the computer and you send one of your representatives, Jake Rayburn, Dan Rollerson, State Senator Tom Lee, you send them emails right now and you tell them, as a parent, as a grandparent, for you young people here, you all get on the computer and tell them, stop, this doesn't work. We have got to be teaching kids how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide before they get to the 5th grade. And we already know now that it doesn't, they're teaching them feelings in the 3rd grade about math. How do you feel math? Anyway, Ms. Harmon, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Now, real quick, Karina.
Today there was a national Twitter rally to stop Common Core. We trended number 2 on Twitter. So if you use the hashtag Stop Common Core, that'll keep us, it'll get us past corporate controlled media and into other people's minds. So
Terrific. Thank you, Karina. Karina Morrison, another Patriot mom back there, doing the Lord's work. Thank you very much. Listen, and I'm reminded real quickly, someone was asking about some flyers for the Liberty Festival. They're on the back table back there. We have some more flyers, so if you need information on the Liberty Festival, it's back there. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure and privilege to bring to you our featured speaker for the evening, Dr. White. Ms. Harmon did a great job of teeing the ball up. I use a lot of golf analogies, especially on Thursday afternoons. But for Dr. Effrem to come and give us some of the meat, some real actionable information that we can use, we can take, and immediately this evening, tomorrow morning, get right on it and take some action about this, on this. Let me share with you about Dr. Karen Effrem. She's a pediatrician, a researcher, and a conference speaker. Dr. Effrem's medical degree is from Johns Hopkins University and her pediatric training from the University of Minnesota. She's provided testimony for Congress as well as in-depth analysis of numerous pieces of major federal education, health, and early childhood legislation for congressional staff, state legislatures, and many organizations. Dr. Effrem serves on the boards of 4 national organizations: Education Liberty Watch, the Alliance for Human Research Protection, the International Society for Ethical Psychiatry and Psychology, and the National Physicians Center. She's spoken at numerous state and national conferences, been interviewed by Fox News, interviewed by or quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the British Medical Journal, National Journal, WorldNetDaily, NewsMax newspapers, radio and television stations across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to bring to you Dr. Karen Effrem.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you very much to all of you for inviting me and for your willingness to work. And thank you for your excellent comments. This is a huge issue. This will affect not only right now, but generations to come if we do not take action. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. I'm going to talk first about the origins of Common Core. The states were required to adopt national standards as part of the Race to the Top grant program slipped into the 2009 stimulus bill, as our previous speaker mentioned. There were no committee hearings or debate in Congress about Race to the Top or the standards. Not a single bit. It was a $4.3 billion grant program for Race to the Top, and then a separate it's actually $1 million grant system, that's a mistake on my part, to develop a statewide student data system. But that was also in the stimulus bill, and that's a key part of this, is the data collection. What is Common Core? Even though it's called state standards, and I put that into quotation marks, they're actually national K-12 standards in English and math. They were developed by the Council of Chief State School Officers, the National Governors Association, and a group called Achieve. And parenthetically, I'll just tell you that those same 3 groups were involved in developing what was first called America 2000 under President George H.W. Bush, that became Goals 2000 under President Clinton. But that was the last attempt to nationalize education, and that started in 1994. It was passed then, and states around the country had to put in state standards, which was a big step away from locally controlled district standards. These standards are not state developed. Do not fall for that line that these standards are state developed or state led, because they are not. They were copyrighted by the groups that put them, that wrote them, and they were required to be adopted verbatim. So if a state was going to sign on, they had to take all of the standards and then could add 15% of their own content, but none of that 15%, as small as it is going to be involved in the national tests that go with it. So we have national standards. We have national assessments. We have federal involvement in assessment writing and model curriculum guidelines. So again, they'll say, oh, it's not a curriculum, it's just standards. Well, what do you think school districts for their funding and teachers for their pay and their tenure are going to follow? Locally developed 15% of extra stuff, or the model curriculum that's put out by the federally funded consortia that are writing these tests? There's teacher pay and tenure reform, which is, I think, the reason that a lot of Republicans joined in on this whole idea of race to the top and the Common Core standards, because they thought it was going to be a way to break the teachers' unions. But they were sold a bill of goods because they lost control of the standards, and it's a real problem. And they also bought into all the other bad parts, which includes a state longitudinal data system and what they call P through 20 monitoring, which is cradle to career monitoring and oversight by the government of everybody, literally from preschool through the workforce, not just K through 12, but it's a whole system to establish education and workforce. And then there's a big expansion of preschool. And along with that, after the Race to the Top grants, there was something called the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge, which was basically a baby race to the top. And it includes national early childhood standards, kindergarten readiness assessments, quality rating system, again, a longitudinal data system, screening, a big push for early childhood screening that has a really big emphasis on what they call socio-emotional or mental health screening of 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. So how many people are comfortable with the government deciding what is normal behavior, thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs of our youngest children? I'm not. And then home visiting, so we can have someone from the government who is here to help us raise our children. There are many, many, many problems with Common Core, and I'm going to go through them as best I can. Conflicts of interest, lack of academic quality, radical connections, psychological manipulation, loss of privacy and data collection, huge cost, huge unfunded mandates. This is a big issue for school board elections and also for county commissioners. Career tracking, basically having kids steered into their work based on the needs of local businesses or corporations and the state, not necessarily what the children and the families want. And that is a system that has been tried many other places and hasn't really done well. Effect on private and home schools, which was already mentioned. Loss of parental control, parental and local control, and state sovereignty. And then the illegality that Ms. Harmon mentioned as well. Here are the proponents of Common Core. The biggest one is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Microsoft, which stands to benefit hugely from the computer data systems and the computerized curriculum. GE, which will benefit from the hardware and software, and hardware not only for the assessments, which are all going to be computerized, but also the monitoring equipment, which I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. ExxonMobil, the despicable ads from the Masters tournament were already mentioned. The National Chamber of Commerce. I'm not saying any of this about, local chambers who are small business people, but the National Chamber of Commerce is big into this. The same with the National Business Partnership and the Business Roundtable. Former Governor Bush is an enormous proponent of this, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. More proponents are the three organizations, obviously, that helped develop the standards: the Council of Chief State School Officers, ACHIEVE, and the National Governors Association. The National PTA, Foundation for Excellence in Education, which is Jeb Bush's foundation. The Thomas B. Fordham Institute, which goes around making pronouncements on all the state standards. The Manhattan Institute, the Harvard Review. So they've been writing about the wonders of it, and I don't know how many of you saw the article in National Review a week or so ago, written by someone from from the Fordham Foundation and the Manhattan Institute, saying that all of us benighted citizens that are objecting to this are really stupid and couldn't possibly think that there's anything wrong with Common Core. Well, guess what? All of these organizations have received enormous contributions or grants from the Gates Foundation. All of them. So anything that they say about Common Core really needs to be scrutinized in that light. Even if you take the Thomas Fordham Foundation Institute's finding that the Common Core standards are of high quality and high academic rigor, you have to wonder about their rating, because they said that Common Core, Florida's current standards, the Sunshine Standards, are already near or above the quality of Common Core. In mathematics, actually, Florida's grade is a little higher, and the English is just a little bit lower. So why are we spending what could be $1 billion to put in this new system when the standards are already, by their view, about the same. There is a huge problem with academic quality loss. They define college readiness as being the same for 4-year, 2-year, and vocational colleges. So that's basically diluting the academics required for a selective 4-year university. And despite claims by proponents that the standards are internationally benchmarked, several people on the validation committee that were very well qualified asked repeatedly for the evidence, and they never got it. And so these 4 people, including Dr. Sandra Stotsky and Dr. James Milgram, who was the only mathematician on the panel, they refused to sign off. They refused to sign off on the final standards because they had so many concerns about their quality. For English, none of the major Common Core architects had ever taught in a K through 12 classroom. The reading is at a 7th grade level. They're basically empty skill sets. And so they have to, it's the same set of skills whether you're talking about reading a menu or whether you're talking about reading Moby Dick. So they don't learn the importance and the qualities of great literature. The emphasis on informational texts instead of literature results in a significant reduction in literary study, leading, according to Sandra Stotsky, quote, to fewer opportunities for students to acquire the general academic vocabulary needed for college work. She also said the division of reading standards leads to a completely incoherent literature curriculum in grades 6 through 12. Neither the literature nor the informational texts are taught in context. For instance, the students are required to read the Gettysburg Address, which is a very important and good thing for them to read. However, the teachers are taught to have them read it completely without context. Can't tell them it was during the Civil War. Can't tell them that it was after the most significant battle of that war. Can't tell them that it was for a funeral ceremony. It's just ridiculous. And even for the literature, Mary Graybar, who's an excellent writer and has a website called dissidentprof.com, analyzed a model lesson from Florida for Animal Farm. And she found that they did talk about some groups having too much power, and even used the phrase power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, but never taught the source of that quote, and never taught that this was written as a warning sign of Soviet communism. So even though they're teaching some literature, which by the end of high school is only going to be 30%, they're not teaching it well, and they're not teaching it in a context where kids are going to really learn the principles that great literature teaches. So it will destroy the love of reading, because they're going to be reading installation manuals and federal executive orders and menus. There's something called everyday literacy, which according to Education Week, is put out by the Scholastic group that makes the little magazine where you can order books in elementary school. It's Everyday Literacy. It's a K through 6 program that incorporates brochures, catalogs, menus, and other types of texts.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yes.
What do you expect from the world's richest computer geek? You know, he wants you to be able to read off Microsoft. Anything else is incidental.
That's right. This model lesson was from the Common Core English standards, and it equates the Bible with mythology, and this was the teacher had the student model being crucified in the classroom. When we go over to math, none of the major Common Core architects ever taught math in a classroom either. The only mathematician on the panel refused to sign off. It delays algebra until 9th grade, decreasing the likelihood of readiness for a 4-year college. Teaches geometry by an experimental method that has never succeeded. And children are 2 years behind their international peers in 8th grade. That's in 8th grade, and it's worse by the end of high school. Well, where's this coming from? Let's look at just a couple of the big proponents and movers and shakers within Common Core. And one of the major ones is Linda Darling Hammond. She is mentor or advisor to President Obama's Equity and Excellence Commission, the Council of Chief State School Officers, the National Governors Association, 2 of the major authors of the Common Core. She was on the Common Core Validation Committee. She is involved with one of the 2 testing consortia that is making the national tests. And she's an advisor to C-Scope, which is that, I think you asked the question about the not being able to see the curriculum. That is more the case with C-Scope than the Common Core so far, because that is a computerized curriculum. It was slipped into Texas because Texas had refused the Common Core, and they had very good standards in a lot of their subject areas, especially in social studies. And so they started using the C-Scope curriculum, which wasn't following the Texas standards, wasn't shown to anybody, and all the teachers had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that they absolutely could not tell the parents or anybody else what was in it. So that's the C-Scope issue. It may end up being that way with Common Core, but we're not sure yet. She's big into radical egalitarianism. She gave a speech to UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and she said, "We allow this extraordinary inequality in America, which may cause us to innovate our way to failure." And she actually, on the commission, on the Excellence and Equity Commission, came up with a report that says that the federal government should allocate resources to level the playing field. So, a radical redistributionist. She's great friends with Bill Ayers, who suggested Linda Darling Hammond as Secretary of Education. Ayers spoke at a major education conference with the head of Achieve, who spoke on Common Core at that conference, and Arnie Duncan was in attendance, the Secretary of Education. Bill Ayers said, if we want change to come, we would do well not to look at the sites of power we have no access to, the White House, the Congress, the Pentagon, but we have absolute access to the community, the school, the neighborhood, the street, and the classroom. So these are the kind of people that are behind, and their philosophy are behind this. Mary Graybar reported about Mark Aronson, who's a radical history professor and liar about communism, J. Edgar Hoover, and the Cold War, and he presented as a panelist on for a series called Trade Books and the Common Core, Where Do They Meet? And he actually believes that speeches of Malcolm X should be considered foundational documents. And then I think a lot of you have probably heard about Melissa Harris Perry. I will play this and see if it works.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
So with that understanding of philosophy, let me move on to the psychological manipulation aspects of these standards and the assessments. The assessments are assessing attitudes, not knowledge. This is a quote from the United States Department of Education report that was just released in February of 2013. It says, as new assessment systems are developed to reflect the new standards, attention will need to be given to the design of tasks and situations that call on students to apply a range of 21st century competencies that are relevant to each discipline. A sustained program of research and development will be required to create assessments that are capable of measuring cognitive, meaning knowledge, which is what we want, and then intrapersonal and interpersonal skills. So, psychological stuff. From the same report, they concluded that researchers should work closely with technology developers to continue to explore how to integrate best practices into new and emerging digital learning environments that are well positioned to promote grit, tenacity, and perseverance in key psychological resources, mindsets, learning strategies, and effortful control for a range of purposes. So this is the Federal Department of Education, the U.S. government, telling test developers how that they want them to develop tests that measure these kinds of psychological attitudes. Not that grit, tenacity, and perseverance are necessarily bad things, but I get really, really uncomfortable when the federal government is in charge of molding and deciding what attitudes are going to be promoted. Just to give you a little example of what's going on with the early childhood standards, these are some excerpts from the Head Start Child Outcome Framework. They talk about wanting children to progress in responding sympathetically to peers who are in need, upset, hurt, or angry, and in expressing empathy or caring for others. Develops an ability to identify personal characteristics, including gender and family composition. Guess what that means? And then develops a growing awareness of jobs and what is required to perform them. Do we really need 3-year-olds to be thinking about their careers? Yeah. These are from Minnesota's standards because these are the ones that I was most involved with. I haven't studied the Florida ones yet in great detail, but I just want to show you that they are almost carbon copies. You have the showing, discussing feelings and showing empathy. You have gender and cultural identity, which is even worse than the Head Start standard, and I'll show you why in a second. And then recognizing and describing roles of workers in the community. Here's the definition of gender identity from the Gay Straight Alliance Network. It says, it refers to a person's internal, deeply felt sense of being either male or female, or something other or in between. Because gender identity is internal and personally defined, it is not visible to others. This is the kind of stuff that is going to be percolating up through our preschools. The National Association for the Education of Young Children, which puts out curriculum, which was involved in developing the Head Start standards, has really radical stuff, and I don't have time to give you that tonight, but I just want to let you know that this is truly a cradle to grave plan. Not only are they going to be doing psychological manipulation, but of course they're going to be doing psychological monitoring. Again, from that same report I quoted earlier, there are important opportunities to leverage new and emerging advances in technology, including education, data mining, and affective computing. Online resources, tools for teachers to develop unprecedented approaches for a wide range of students. And then this is a kindergarten readiness assessment, which they use in Minnesota, but it's actually used in many states around the nation. And they talk about eagerness and curiosity, empathy, and all of those things I just told you about. And then these are the monitoring devices that are in that Department of Education report. You have a facial expression camera, a posture analysis seat, a pressure mouse, a wireless skin conductance sensor, and all sorts of other. And this is what they want to use on kids while they're in front of their computers getting their computerized curriculum and or assessments from the state standards. The National Education Data Model wants to monitor all sorts of things like bus routes, at-risk status, disease, illness, or health condition, religious affiliation, and voting status. The Early Learning Challenge Collaborative talked about what different states were doing in their race to the top Early Learning Challenge applications, and they were saying that California's kindergarten readiness assessment will include social emotional, that means mental health, developmental domains, and data on readiness will be linked to the K-12 data system. And North Carolina wants to screen all children. Minnesota's early childhood screening health history form asks about guns in the home. In Rhode Island, proposed early learning data system will be linked to both the K-12 data system and to the state's universal newborn screening and health data system. Well, you know what they do with newborn screening? That is genetic testing. And so they're going to link health, genetic, and this mental health and academic data all into one database. And they also want to have a human capital development data system. We need more unit record data that documents educational participation and experiences in both K-12 and post-secondary education, as well as in the workforce. Well, teachers are not happy with this, as you can imagine, and sometimes they're dismissed as that they just don't want to be held accountable for their teaching. And, you know, I can get that to a certain extent with the union hierarchy, but there are an awful lot of very good teachers that are extremely distressed, and rightfully so, about this. The left fears one-size-fits-all instruction that will turn teachers into widget makers whose primary purpose is to prepare students for testing, not learning, and that's a valid concern. Teachers and parents are organizing testing boycotts all over the country, and that may be something that has to be considered. The Rochester Teachers Union of New York, which is the largest teachers union in the state, is opposing Common Core, even though the national unions are supporting it. Many teachers are resigning, as you talked about, and they're afraid to speak out due to fear of losing their jobs. 500 pre-kindergarten teachers signed a statement against the Common Core. We also have a weakening of the federal privacy law. It's called FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Student data can now be shared with other federal agencies without consent, and student data can now be accessed by corporations or outside researchers if designated by state or federal education agencies to do an audit or be involved in compliance. So they can basically designate anybody that they want to receive our kids' data without our consent. This is an enormous unfunded mandate. The Pioneer Institute did what they called a middle-of-the-road assessment for the costs nationwide for implementing Common Core for testing, technology, textbooks, and professional development. For Florida, it's over $1 billion. We've received 906 million in grants received, which leaves, at a minimum, by this estimate, $118,325,000 cost to the Florida taxpayers. They broke that down to about $389 per student cost. Where are we going to get that kind of money? The testing costs in South Carolina are projected to be $100 per student. And the FCAT costs currently, or the most current data I could find, is only $19.44 per student. So it's a lot different. The Florida State Board is asking for $400 million in 1 year for Common Core assessments, just the assessments, which is the same amount spent on the FCAT from 1996 to 2008. New York State, there was some data about districts and huge differences in costs compared to the grants they got. I'm not going to go into every little number. And now I'm going to talk about the career tracking. And this is excerpts from a letter from Mark Tucker, who's a friend of Bill and Hillary, from 1992, right after they were elected. And he said that his vision is to remold the entire American system into a seamless web that literally extends from cradle to grave and is the same system for everyone. And it would be coordinated by a system of labor market boards at the local, state, and federal levels where curriculum and job matching will be handled by counselors accessing the integrated computer-based program. That was in 1992. But doesn't that just sound exactly like what we're doing now? Or what they want to do? This is a diagram that was put together by a colleague of mine at Education Liberty Watch back then. And it shows the interaction between education, business, and government with all these public-private partnerships. And Goals 2000 was the education part of it. The Workforce Investment Act was the labor part of it. And then the school to work part was the connection between education and business. Well, now that Goals 2000 part can just be filled in by Common Core, and it's worse. The private and homeschoolers, Ms. Harmon has already talked about that. I want to emphasize that Governor Scott wants private voucher students to take the Common Core tests. He's already said that. Fortunately, no bill has come across like that. And the SAT is now going to be aligned to the Common Core because the new president of the College Board was one of the authors of the Common Core English. As was stated, it violates 3 different federal laws. They all say that the federal government can't be involved in curriculum. And this is obviously a violation of that. There are some major bills happening in the legislature right now. The Data System and Tracking Bill, Senate Bill 878 and House Bill 7027. Looks like 878 is going to pass. We got a couple of amendments that made it maybe a tiny bit better, but it's still bad. Senate Bill 1630 by Senator Legg is the only one that's a little bit helpful because it delays implementation until the technology is ready and been tested. And 1624 implements Common Core for pre-K, but fortunately that one doesn't seem to be going anywhere. 7091 and Senate Bill 1076 have passed. 1076 is being sent to the governor, and it does implement Common Core eventually. It changes the high school diploma designations, including industry certification courses, and it requires a career planning course by the end of 8th grade. Now tell me how many 8th graders know what they want to do.
You're going to tell you.
Right. 878 connects to a national database and it monitors data from pre-K through the work life. So what can we do? I'm going to give you some websites, and there should be some on your sheets. The bulleted sheet, the smaller one, I think has the websites on it.
Okay, if you don't have the sheets, make sure we have your email address. We'll get it to you. And the guy that did the printing for Dr. Effrem today put everything all in one package, so blame him.
Tim Curtis.
But they're all there.
Okay. We actually have a lobbyist that is in Tallahassee trying to fight this stuff. His name is Randy Osborne, and he's doing a fantastic job, but he's up against really huge odds because it's the Bush, Bill Gates machine. But he did say that the phone calls that are already coming in are making a huge difference, and one senator reported 100 phone calls in one day against Common Core and only 1 in support. So That's one place you can really help, is tomorrow, get on the phone, get on your computers and say, we don't want Common Core and we don't want data tracking, and we demand that you stop it. There's a petition that you can get through from several of the sites, and we really need help. Randy's up against a big machine. You can do non-tax deductible donations for lobbying through Florida Eagle Forum, and deductible donations through Education Liberty Watch for education materials. Urge others to join this coalition, and if God is gracious and we can slow things down, we're going to get ready for a massive resistance and education effort this next year. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, when they come for the innocent and they do not have to cross over your body, curses be to your life or religion. Yeah. This is our kids. We have to make a stand. And C.S. Lewis said, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive, and he's absolutely right. So Floridians Against Common Core Education is that one. Education Liberty Watch, and the petition is available at the Florida Action Coalition. But I'm going to send you mostly to Floridians Against Common Core Education. So please find the address in your papers or write it down. I'll leave it up. Thank you for your patience.
Get me the lights, please.